Firstly, thank you so much, Mr. Vinay Goel, for taking out the time from your busy schedule. I would like to share a little background about Mr. Goel with everyone here. Mr. Goel completed his bachelor's degree in computer science from the University of California at Berkeley and his master's in management from Northwestern University's Kellogg Graduate School of Management. Early in his career, Mr. Goel served in product development and management roles at companies including Oracle, Intel, Checkpoint Software, and Silicon Valley startups. Mr. Goel then served in global product leadership roles at Google, including Google Maps, Google Station, and other high-profile products during his 11-year tenure. He founded and managed Google's internet connectivity initiatives for developing markets. He was country head of products for Google India from 2007 to 2011, where he led global projects across Google Search, Ads, Mobile, and Geo products. Currently, Mr. Goel is JLL's Chief Digital Product Officer. In this global role, he ensures clients have access to the best technology, expertise, and products in order to drive business transformation, integrate new technologies into workplaces, and use data-driven insights to derive new value from their real estate portfolios. Welcome, Mr. Goel. We feel good to have you with us, and we look forward to your valuable insights.
Thanks. Thank you, Maiti, very much for that introduction. So it was a long, I didn't realize how long that introduction was going to be. And thank you everyone for being on this. I know it's late on a Saturday evening. It's time when most of you, I would expect, would be out for dinner or partying somewhere, and you've taken the time to spend it with me. So I appreciate you coming online. Is there anything specific, Simran or Maiti, that you'd like me to say, or should I just maybe just talk about sort of my experiences over time, and then over, we can open it up for questions.
So, firstly, we would like to know your experiences, your journey from India to California,
Sure.
and what are the things we can learn from your journey.
Oh, absolutely. Okay. So very quickly, I grew up in a suburb of Bombay, or Mumbai now, and I'd say maybe for the most of my life, I was quite an average student growing up in a middle-class family, going to a public school that was close by to our house. And maybe something, around ninth standard or so is when some tube light sort of maybe switched out in my brain and said, okay, now it's time to get serious and stop playing cricket and table tennis and all of those things for most of my life, and instead start getting a little serious before the 10th standard board. Things got better, I think, from that time, and been a little bit more academic. And so it was interesting. I went through, in Mumbai, you have the 10+2 system. So you did the 10th grade, and then you went to a junior college for 11th and 12th, so after school, which was, by the way, a Catholic public school that I went to, I went to a South Indian junior college. It was called South Indian Educational Society. It's also not too far from my house, and did science for 11th and 12th. And then interestingly enough, I had a uncle of mine who's also from Calcutta, actually. And he had moved to the US a few years. He had been there, he had come here for his master's, and he was working at Intel. And I was very close to him. So he suggested the idea that I should think about coming to the US for undergrad, which at that time, very few people could do that, or ever even thought about coming to the US. And this was really in the mid-1980s, right? So now it's much more common for people to finish high school in India and come to the US, but at that time it was very uncommon. So so I did manage to come and visit the US prior to that year, and I was quite interested in coming back. I really liked the campus, what they're doing, freedom of choosing type of classes as opposed to, when you go into a engineering college, there's a very set curriculum about the classes you have to take before you graduate. And here, you had the opportunity of thinking through whether you wanted to study history or philosophy and engineering and computer science and everything else, and you could do all of that together. So I applied and applied to a few colleges, and it was kind of a learning experience. The whole idea of taking an SAT exam and TOEFL to test your English scores and all that was kind of new. So I somehow managed to pass those types of things at a decent enough level that I got accepted in a few colleges. And because Berkeley was closer to where my uncle was, because he was in California, I ended up coming to California. And it was also an interesting thing trying to get a visa to come in here. I think I got rejected 3 times in 1 week at the US consulate for a variety of reasons. They didn't think I'd come back. Probably they were right. Um, and then, but finally I did get the visa and was able to come here and study computer science, which I didn't really even know what it meant, because this is the time where everyone was using COBOL and Fortran, mostly in India, and you didn't really have, computers weren't easily available or classes weren't easily available. So it was kind of a good learning experience to sort of travel outside of India for the first time, um, and get into a whole new environment, learn something that you've never really seen before in terms of computers. But it was a fascinating 4 years. Not too many Indians at that time in the university, and all the Indians that were there were much older than me, because typically these were folks that came from IIT and were doing their PhD at Berkeley. So you were somewhat enamored by how smart they were. And, these are people who not only got into IIT with very hard, high ranks, but also then became presidential gold medalists and are now doing PhDs and things like that. But it was probably the time that their influence changed my life very profoundly, in the sense that you start thinking like them, right? You get excited by math problems. You get excited by trying to crack a theorem that hasn't been cracked for 100 years. So your brain shifts a little bit. And I'd say some of the learnings here, maybe just thinking about, what I've said so far, two things is, there are some people who are just born geniuses, and the other people have to really work hard at it. And it requires a lot of focus. So I think that regardless of where you are in the spectrum, and it doesn't really matter how good a student you have been in the past or how great you have been in the past, I think there's always time for people to kind of have that tube light switch. And for some people, it switches in third grade, and some people ninth grade, and sometimes it switches after college, right? So I just think that everyone has their own timetable for these types of things, but if you work towards it, I think that's important. Second is, and I just think about this experience that I had at Berkeley, which is surround yourself with people who are inspirational, right? And I think if you move around with people that have specific talents, they don't have to be the genius variety, but maybe they're really good dancers, so they're very good musicians, so they're very good comedians, or it could be anything. But I think nobody becomes very good at anything unless they are really working hard at it. And I think it's that ethic of understanding how people are doing, and they're not just, kind of winging it or spending their time watching, TV or something like that. You don't become very good at something when that's what you do. So I think you're managing your peer group and consciously makes a big difference. So those were at least early learnings for me by the time I graduated college. And I took a job, I got a job. It wasn't that hard actually at that time, because computer science was still kind of an early field. And if you had a computer science degree, it wasn't hard to get a job at Oracle as a software developer. And very quickly, in 6 months, I realized that while I love technology, I'm not sure I really want to be a software developer for all my life. So I applied for an MBA program almost as soon as I started work, and and I got accepted into Northwestern. So the following year, maybe I basically worked about a year and a half, and then I went to business school in Chicago and did marketing and finance. And then since then, I've always been in technology, but um, but more on the product side of things and product marketing, as opposed to actually being a software developer or a hardware engineer or something like that. So I'm seeing some questions here, and maybe we'll get to those questions as well in the chat session. So since that time, I think there are a few things that I've learned. Sometimes you end up taking a job and then you leaving it because you think someone is going to pay you more money, right? And I've done that a couple of times. And those have never really worked out well, because people who end up paying you more money, and you keep switching jobs, it tends to be companies that may not be around for a long time, or they're more desperate to get people like you, right? And so be more deliberate, I'd say, around the type of companies you choose to work for. Some of us don't have a choice. Some of us just need to get a job, and that's fine. But over time, as you kind of um, build out some experience, try to think about which direction you want to take your career in. Think about the technology trends that are happening. If you think about, you go back 15 years, everything was moving to the cloud. So you could say, I want to push my career towards the cloud. If you think about 12 years ago, everything was moving towards smartphones. So you can say, look, I want to be in a company that is very focused on mobile. 5 years ago, or 3 to 5 years ago, everything is switching to artificial intelligence. So you might say, I want to position my career and learn machine learning and things like that, and become conversant enough so that people might hire me in that area. So just think about where these trends are going. And then if you start positioning yourself both from a skill set as well as working for companies that are taking more of a leadership role in those types of things. Now, I'm talking more from a technology perspective. I'm not sure if everyone here is in the IT area, or maybe some people are more in business and commerce and economics and other things. But I think the thought process is the same, right? Position yourself to or create that aim where you really want to go after a certain type of career. Position yourself as being one of the most knowledgeable people in a specific field. Everything is available online in terms of gaining knowledge, whether you look at videos or you look at books or whatever it is, you can get it. Um, so I think those are really important types of things. I've spent 5 years working with Google out of Bangalore, and to me, there's really no difference in terms of the type of caliber of people that we were able to hire in Google in India versus the people that we hire here, right? So I do think that there are some amazing technologists that are in India, and you will have, given we all have family members and we have large families, you will always find that one person that in your family that has done really well and could be a mentor for you as well. So spend time with them. They may be a first cousin or second cousin, whatever, but we're always open, right? So spend time with them. Maybe learn from them as well as you think about where your career needs to head. So, currently I'm with a company called JLL, which is in the real estate services company, and I got really interested in them because I looked at, the last 7 or 8 years, there's been a big movement to whatever they call fintech, which is financial tech. There are a lot of big companies or startups that have now become big companies in that area. Similarly, there is a trend going towards property technology, and they call it prop tech. And JLL is one of the leaders in property, not necessarily in technology. And essentially, what I'm doing here is building out a technology team that will take advantage of many of the assets that JLL has, whether it's the data or the customer relationships, and build compelling products that we can take to market. So one of the products, for example, is if you use Siri on an iPhone, or if you use Alexa or Google Assistant, typically you use those in a consumer framework, which is you use them as yourself at home. You don't use them at work. It doesn't help you set up a meeting at work or find out, when the next shuttle schedule from your office is to somewhere else. And we are building the equivalent of that using voice and chat uh, as a mobile app, but for work. So if for some reason the toilet is clogged, you can complain about that and file an issue. If you want to book a meeting and invite Simran and my team, you can do that and say, just book a meeting with Simran, and you find a time and book a meeting on your work calendar, not on your personal Gmail or Yahoo calendars, but on your work calendar. So those are the kinds of things that we are quite excited about, and having a lot of fun developing. So with that, I know it's about 20 minutes in, so I will maybe stop talking, and perhaps we can go to the questions that have come in the chat, or if other people want to ask questions directly, happy to take that
So,
as well.
one of our volunteer wants to ask that what should we do to excel in the IT industry?
Yeah, I think I kind of talked about some of that, and which is have a passion, right? Become knowledgeable about this space and become somewhat of an expert. And it's not an easy thing to do to suddenly become an expert overnight, but um, there is so much material there, and to become an expert in the IT industry, you have to get your hands dirty a little bit. So I get a lot of people from university as well that might be looking for jobs here, and they keep saying like, "How do I prepare myself for a job?" And I usually say, yes, you want to do well in school, and we will look at your grades, but more than your grades, because everyone will go through those same 10, 15 classes that you've gone through, and some may have B pluses and some may have A's or whatever. But in the end of the day, we're looking for people who went outside of their core curriculum and did something on their own, right? So did you think about an app idea and did you actually build it? Did you go into a GitHub and anything with open source, and did you contribute to an open source repository? And that shows that you're actually genuinely interested in the space that you're in, right? Outside of someone told me to study and I studied and I got a grade, right? That doesn't necessarily show that you will take, and when you come into the job environment, you're going to take it to the next level, or you're going to be a contributor as opposed to I might tell you what to do and you will do it, but that's great. But most of what we really expect people to do is to come with ideas of their own and show things that they have been able to do and take their own initiative. So I think that would be the single one thing that I'd say to do is think about what you can do on your own as opposed to what other people are telling you to do.
So, we do have one more question from Vignesh. That is, what would be the next big wave, something similar to WWW in the coming years?
Yeah, I mean, I think well, the internet was a fairly transformational wave, right? And that while it existed for a long time in universities and defense departments with TCP/IP, it was really when the browser came out in 1994 is when it became consumerized for all of us, right? Um, and that has been a big thing. And then I'd say, that was definitely a big wave. Cloud computing became a big wave in the early 2000s. Um, and then, like I said, with the smartphones, 1997, 98, and then I'd say around 2015 with AI. I do think that AI, which is a very broad term, but it includes everything from machines getting smarter and doing things that may not be as intuitive, right, without specific programming. But it's also this whole wave of natural language where today you can speak to applications in natural language and they understand what you want to do, right? So I could have come to this meeting and just open up my laptop and said, start my meeting. And without ever pressing anything, this meeting could have started, right? Um, and I could have done that on my phone. So I think so far, at least the common wisdom is that AI, if you're looking for something that is as big as www, like AI is definitely in that space. But within that, I'd say if you kind of think about different industries. So take my example with JLL, right? Is real estate prop tech the next big wave? No, it's not at the same magnitude as cloud computing and those types of things. But I think there is a nugget here, which is many traditional companies, whether you're a real estate company or a pharmaceutical company or a consumer product goods company, you're sitting on a lot of data. You're sitting on customer data, you're sitting on product research data, you're sitting on industry data, and all of this data is very valuable. So when you think about the impact that data science can have, or what you do with machine learning with that type of data, there are just so many things that can make your profits go up, your consumers' experience become that much better. So while it may not be like the next big wave, there's a lot of innovation that can come from traditional industries by leveraging what technology is becoming more mainstream over time.
So, Sulagna has one more question. How do you think that an MBA education in India is different from the same in the States?
So it's a really good question. And when I was in India with Google, we actually hired quite a few people from ISB, Hyderabad, or IM, and other schools. And the caliber of those people coming in, the education that they have gone through, I don't think was any different than the education that maybe I would have gotten going to business school here. You're really looking at the same textbooks. You're looking at the same case studies. The caliber of your teachers and professors is about the same because many of these people have been educated in the US and have decided to go back. Again, now I'm talking about maybe the tier 1 schools in India. I probably am not very well versed with some of the other schools. But whether it's a symbiosis in Bombay or an ISB or an IIM, I think that is generally true where you'll get a very, very good education. The one thing I would say though is not so much about the education, but sometimes it's the attitude of the students, right? And I'll give you an example where when I was in Google in Bangalore, we had invited students from Stanford who were visiting from the Stanford Business School that were visiting India, and one of the IMs, which was a sister school. And we had students from both MBA programs visiting Google, right? And so we had about 15, 20 Google people and maybe 20 to 30 students in the room. And there was chai and there's samosas and there's all of us and we're chatting. Um, by far, most of the students are from the IIM were talking to themselves and having chai and samosa, whereas the students from Stanford were actually trying to talk to people from Google and learn about those experiences. So I think the difference about how people will perform is really how you engage, right? And you don't get the opportunity to be at a Google or a Facebook or a Procter and Gamble every day. You get to be with your classmates every day and have chai and salsa, right? So it's sometimes putting yourself in that situation and say, maybe it's more comfortable to be talking to your friends rather than talking to someone else, but you really need to get out of your comfort zone and do something that is useful, right? And say, how do I get the most value from the situation that I'm in and with the people that I'm in. And so I'd say it's not so much the program and the students and all of that type of stuff. It's sometimes it boils down to the attitude and your personalities.
So, so we do have more questions. How can we improve our learning attitude?
And I think that's partly, I don't know if I saw that question here, but that is exactly what I was kind of talking about, right? Which is, I think it's if you do meditation, right, or if you go to any one of the art of living classes or things like that, one of the things that you will learn, and not that I do meditation or I do art of living, but my wife does, so I hear things, right? But I think one of the things that you will hear, and this is also what any good coach would tell you, is to be present. And and I remember when I was in school in Bombay, right? Every time you walked into the class and the teacher would count your roll numbers and you say roll number 10 and roll number 12 and you would say present teacher, but were you really present, right? And I think the thing here is uh, the way to be a more engaged student, to be present in the situation of when you're learning something, are you really paying attention? Are you trying to figure it out? Are you asking questions? And I think those are the types of things that become important. And I'd say, if anything, I'd say, yeah, be present in the real way to basically increase your learning.
So, so Sahil wants to ask that what role will data analytics and big data will play for businesses in the coming years?
Yeah, so um, again, it's very hard for me to gauge sort of how much people are here are data scientists or understand a lot of those types of things, but it is by far one of the most important things that people will be doing in their companies. So every technology company that has an app is essentially logging each and every interaction that users have with the app to understand what is working, what is not working, which area should I maybe continue to improve upon, which area should I invest more in, where is the user engagement happening. I do the same thing in real estate, right? So um, when when I look at, say, I might have 1 million data properties, commercial property data in India, right? And I know when people leased it, what people paid for it, what are the lease terms for that property. Now, if I did enough data science for it, I could basically, the next time I have a client that wants to lease a property, I can tell them, this is how much you should pay for it, regardless of what the landlord is asking. I know that usually landlords will give you 3 months free rent, and then they will, instead of 5-year terms, be okay with 3-year terms. And that's the power of data science, where if I knew all of that data, it improves your negotiating power going into a meeting, right? So I think that's going to happen everywhere. There was also a question about, how will data or what's the next big step in the medical area from a technology perspective, and it's the same thing, right? If doctors are going and logging that people are getting the flu, right? And now you think about coronavirus, and suddenly you say, but yeah, but this flu is not getting, and then that data can be logged in a central repository. Suddenly people start seeing trends, right? And then the whole world can respond to the coronavirus, as opposed to, data not being shared in a centralized repository. So I think the value of data is tremendous. Um, Even a company like Google, if you think about their top products, none of them are new. They're all products that have been 10 years old, whether it's Chrome or Search or YouTube or Google Maps. They haven't come up with a huge product in the last 5 years or 10 years, right? It's something that's new. But what they are doing is doing data science, right? So because Google Maps now knows where you usually go, right? It can now suggest places that you should be going to. So it's improved because of data science. So I don't think that you're going to find suddenly the next big app that's coming. Facebook is also 15 years old, right? WhatsApp is very old. So you're not finding innovation happening because new apps are coming. This is what happened 10, 20 years ago. What you're finding is that those apps are getting much, much smarter because they know more about you, they can personalize, and all of that is happening because of data science.
So Chirag has one question, like as we discussed about the MBA program in India and the USA. So is long distance MBA worth it for the people who are already into jobs?
I think that is it depends on your personal situation, right? And it depends on what you're trying to get out of an MBA. I think if you happen to be a deep expert in whichever field you might be, and you're saying, you know what, I want to be a CEO, or I want to have a better understanding of how business decisions should be made, not just how technology or other decisions are made. What is the right framework for me to get that? So maybe I want to learn things that are more public speaking and communications. So if you think about, first you have to break down what is it that an MBA actually gives you. And my takeaway from going through MBA school was, it gives you a framework in which you can model business problems, right? So I can say I want to invest in these types of things, or I can create a business plan for a new idea, or how do I, if I'm in a tough situation as a company and I have a product recall, how should I communicate with internal stakeholders? Hi everyone, I'm back.
Sorry, sir, for this disruption.
No. Wishes, yeah.
Hello.
Yeah, can you hear me? I'm
Yes, sir.
still here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we may have lost all the chat questions. I'm not sure.
So I do have everything, so we can still
Oh, you do?
continue.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, sure. I'm not sure what I was answering last, so
So
maybe we can go
we were
to the next
discussing
question.
about
Yeah.
the difference between a long distance MBA and
Oh,
doing it in colleges.
yeah. So I was just saying that it all depends on what it is that you're looking to get out of it. Um, Personally, I think that if you know exactly what you want to get out of it, you may not need the degree by itself. So you don't need to go do 2 years worth of a long distance MBA just to get a degree. I think you can be much more directed at saying, look, I need to understand strategy, or I need to understand marketing, or I want to be able to do things in public speaking, and take specific courses that help your skill set, as opposed to saying, because I'll have a degree in my resume, I'll get more jobs. Um, I don't think that that is true anymore. So I think it's really the skill set that you bring, and typically, if you're doing long distance, you should do it because of what you're trying to do to sort of enhance yourself or gain that skill set. I think there's a whole different value of doing an MBA where it's a full-time MBA, because you actually spend a lot of time with your peer group, and that learning experience is definitely a very different learning experience than being in front of a computer and taking classes. Because that you can take, there are classes that are available pretty easily. You can do it at your own pace and you will still learn many of the same things. So I think it's a personal preference thing, but personally I'm not that a big fan of long distance MBAs.
So we do have one more question from Roshan, that is, how does mainframe technology still has relevance in the present industry?
I think that it probably will always have some relevance, but in very limited capacity. There may be I don't know, things that you need to do because you're putting a satellite in orbit, or and you need to have computing that is done on premise, and I don't know if I'd call it a mainframe, but you just need a lot of horsepower. So the definition of mainframe, what used to be with IBM in the 1970s or 1980s, is very different than what you would call a mainframe today. In general, yes, it's relevant, but probably not too much. With everything going on to the cloud, whether it's a public cloud or a private cloud, um, the relevance of these things will keep going down over time. So there will be very niche use cases that you might need the concept of a mainframe, but I don't really see that as being very valid going forward. Cool. Can everyone hear me still?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so that's all I had to say about mainframes. It's pretty old, so yeah. Looks like there's another question about what skills do you need to have to
Have
be in
in the
cloud
cloud
tech.
tech.
I mean, yeah, so I don't know if there's any specific skill. It depends on your job. If you're a data center maintenance person, that's a different kind of a skill set. But in general, um, if you're building any sort of program, and you're using things like GitHub and AWS and or Google Cloud Platform, GCP, it's just a matter of getting your hands dirty on all of these types of things. All tech is now pretty much by default become cloud tech. So there's no specific thing that I'd say is cloud tech. So you learn some programming languages. They're going to run in the cloud, all of these programs. So understanding how to just do things, and there are things like DevOps that come in, which basically maintain the status of the cloud. So you can say how's the performance load. If I were to do QA and testing, today I've got 10 users on my app. If it became 100,000 users, how do I simulate that? What if it became 1 million users? How do I simulate that? And you can do all of those types of cloud testing type things. So it depends on, again, where you want to take your career, from a DevOps or QA or performance load testing and those types of things. And so then what you'd call cloud tech may fall into those buckets. Right. Any other questions from anyone?
So I do have one question.
Yeah.
Since we interact with Indians in India and also, youth in California as well, what is the difference in the mindset in Indian youth and the youth in California?
That's a hard question because it's such a diverse population, right? And I think I left Bangalore in 2012. And I think the whole mobile revolution in India was just starting around that 2011-12 time frame. And every time I've gone back now, right, it's there's just so many entrepreneurs, and access to capital is just as easy in India as it is in California. So if you want to think about when you go back to India, everyone's got an idea, everyone's got something that they're doing with apps. But the question is whether you think global or you think local, um, in that sense. So this may not be a super specific, the question was very broad in terms of mindset of, people, young people in India versus California, but I'll maybe push it more on the technology side. I just think that people who are looking here, a lot of people have great ideas. But when they have great ideas, they have great ideas. And in the US, a great idea means that you can create $1 billion company. In India, maybe the aspirations seem to be a little smaller, and mainly because most Indians think about how can I be successful with this product in India with Indian users. And so whether you take Flipkart, right? Amazon didn't say I'm building a marketplace for US, right? They said I want to build a global marketplace. Facebook didn't say I'm building a product with only US users. They said I'm building a product for global. So I think as you think about a lot of these types of things, many of the Indian companies that come out for the Indian market. Same with China, and maybe there's a big enough market there. But I'd love to see more of the young entrepreneurs think more global as opposed to local.
So I do have one more question.
Yeah.
We as Indian youth, what is the thing that we can learn from the Californian culture? Something that is relevant to us and we need to learn.
Yeah, I mean, culturally, I think California can learn more from Indian culture than India can learn from California culture. Um, this just from a personal, and this is more about your value system and those types of things. But if anything else, I would say, it's about ambition, right? People here are doing things. I get to meet people who are now at Berkeley or at Stanford, and typically these people, outside of taking those classes, are always starting their own company while they're in college, right? So it's more entrepreneur. People are willing to take risks, um, and they're coming up with interesting things. So, like 5 years ago, Bitcoin was very early, and yet people in Stanford were building companies around Bitcoin already, right? So the question is, how do you become so, you take risks on early technologies. You don't know if they're going to succeed or not, or whether those technologies will even become real things. But the opportunity cost of you spending, 6 months on it with your friends in college is zero, right? Because what else are you doing? And the chance that it becomes, it's like almost playing a lottery, but you put some sweat equity. You will always get some learning experience out of it, but in the process you may have built $1 billion company. You just don't know. So I think those are the kinds of things that, if you're focused, you're keeping an eye on what's going on in technology trends, and you start tinkering and playing, I think those are the things to real. And that's what I see in many of the students here.
So we do have few more questions. Should I continue with them?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. So Yash wants to ask, what do you think that for a mechanical engineer, it is essential to learn about AI to grab a good job?
Yeah, I think not necessarily my area of expertise, but I'll say one thing, that almost every engineer that I see here in the US, whether you're a mechanical engineer or you might be an applied math student, eventually you need to build some level of programming skills, right? So and when you say AI is nothing more than some specific set of programming skills, which might end up being around data science. So take some classes in industrial engineering, things where you do optimizations and regressions and things like that, which are really math and statistics classes. So if you're a mechanical engineer, take those classes that are more in the stats area, and then learn a programming language. And I'd say that's good enough for you to have the basic knowledge. And then obviously everything that you do will be on the job.
So Pragati wants to ask, what are the skill set acquisitions would you suggest to someone who is from a non-technical background and is aspiring to pursue an MBA?
Yeah, and I think this is, how do you acquire a skill set? And you acquire a skill set by doing specific things many times or for some period of time. Um, and so I think it's one of those things where you may need to be a little bit more deliberate in trying to chart out a career trajectory. In many times, I find that people say, "Oh, I'll go do an MBA because I don't know really what I want to do," and that's fine as well, because MBA gives you somewhat more of a generic skill set. But I wouldn't say that it's that easy to find jobs necessarily just because you have an MBA. Either you have an MBA from one of the really top tier schools, and those schools really help you because the right recruiters come in. But if you get an MBA from some local college, I don't think that necessarily helps you with a specific skill set. So I think online courses, again, not necessarily degrees, but going to things like Coursera or Khan Academy and these types of things are helpful. Um, Getting an apprenticeship and working for somebody in a specific area, I think is helpful. None of these are easy questions, right? Because you need to sort of have some idea what you want to, what kind of passions you have. So a large part of this is spending the time really trying to figure out what it is that you like, what you find exciting, or what you think you might be good at, and then finding a place to be able to get a job or start something in that area and see how it goes. Because I think people will value entrepreneurs, right? Not to say that I did something for 2 hours a day, but I did this for 8 hours a day for a year. And I may be successful, I may not be successful, but I know a lot about this area. And then when you go, you say you were unsuccessful, then you go look for a job, and people talk to you, they understand how much you know about that space. So I think developing a skill set is first really thinking more internally about what it is that you like, what you will enjoy, and what you're capable of doing. Not necessarily capable, because people are capable of anything, but what you might have a passion for.
So Vivek hello.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yes, so Roshan wants to ask that he's not a very ambitious person, but lately he feels the need to be ambitious. How can he help himself becoming ambitious and change his thinking process?
If I knew the answer to that, I'd be having much better conversations with my son. So, I don't know what the answer to that is. I don't know if it's a process. I think this is one of those things that, this is going back to what I said earlier, which is there's that tube light that sometimes comes on, and sometimes it is caused because of uh, self-awareness. Sometimes it's caused because of things that may happen in your family situation. I'm not sure, right? But usually there's always things that trigger someone to get serious about, whether it's a career or family or whatever it is. So I think you have to figure out what it is that you are serious about, and go after it. I don't know if ambition, not everyone that's successful needs to be ambitious, but I think everyone needs to be passionate and hardworking, um, towards whatever they're trying to do. Just saying I want to be a billionaire or a billionaire, or I want to be something, doesn't suddenly mean anything. You can say, oh, I get all these great ideas, but I don't do anything about it. Well, that doesn't matter. Having great ideas doesn't count unless you do something. So I don't think ambitious itself is an interesting enough term. It's more about what do I want to achieve and what do I want to do. And if you set yourself, maybe one of the things to do is set yourself some short-term goals, right? Because ambition tends to be 10 years. What am I going to do in the next 3 years, or not 3 years, but 3 months, right? Towards the goal that I have. And setting yourself on some, actually deliberately writing it down on a piece of paper or on a calendar or on a document or something, right? And saying, these are the things I really want to do this year, right? And many of us, and this is an interesting kind of concept, and that I've been reading on, which is rowing, not drifting. Many of us end up drifting in life, right? kind of day to day, something comes up, we just go in that direction. But it's not directed, right? It just happens to us. Versus people who are rowing boats, right? The people who are rowing boats know exactly where they need to go, and they're moving towards a destination. And every time they move that oar, it is a deliberate maneuver, right? And I think that's what's important is when you're trying to do these things is have that direction and then keep rowing in that direction, as opposed to I'm just hanging on to a pile of wood in the ocean or wherever, and I'm going to drift wherever it takes me, right? So I think that would be a big difference between wanting to be ambition means start setting that direction and moving towards it, as opposed to saying I'll take it day by day.
So Vivek wants to ask,
Yeah.
what and how much is the involvement of data analytics companies in energy market of the US? Is there any visible impact of AI and ML in household power supply or operation of power utilities?
So this is a big area and one that I'm very passionate about, um, especially because as you think about carbon footprint and sustainability from an environmental perspective, almost 35 to 40% of the carbon emissions of the world are coming from what we call the built environment, right? These are buildings, whether they're homes or they're offices or factories or those types of things. So, and a big piece of that obviously is the energy usage in those buildings, whether it's for heating, air conditioning, running of equipment. But heating and air conditioning tends to be sort of probably the largest side of this. And there's a lot of data science that you could have there, because you have a power meter sitting, whether it's outside a factory or a building or a house, and that power meter is essentially consuming energy, or is your reading and providing you data on the energy consumption. So doing data science on that to understand that maybe you have a faulty heating machine that is acting overtime, or your air conditioning is on when no one is around, right? So you don't need to do the extra energy because the number of people in the building is very few. Those are the types of things that data science can help you. And every 10% decrease that you can do in energy consumption actually changes the whole carbon emissions for the world in a pretty dramatic way. So this is an area where if you ever want to be an environmental engineer or study environmental science, combining that with data science, there are a lot of technologies now or companies that are specifically doing this, right? They're doing data science around your utility and energy metrics, and then giving you insights and suggestions on how you could reduce it. You look at a company like Microsoft. What they're doing is typically, if you have a business unit within a company, the IT department will charge you some overhead for all the machines. The real estate department will charge you the overhead for the space that you occupy. Now they're saying we're going to have a sustainability overhead, which means, if you have 1,000 employees in your department, what is the commute that those 1,000 employees do to get to work? How much gas emissions are they creating? When they travel for work in planes and trains or whatever, how much carbon footprint are they creating? When they occupy the space that we've given you and the electrical bills and things like that, what is the carbon footprint that they're building? You add it all together, right? And you say, okay, that's, X amount of carbon footprint, and we're going to charge you a surcharge for every unit of carbon footprint that you have created. And that business unit, you get that money, and then you use it towards things like reforestation, afforestation, carbon credits in other areas, and those types of things. It becomes big. And this is an area that if I don't know if you're familiar with Davos, but Davos is this annual thing in Switzerland where all of the world's leaders, both from industry and politics, come. So many of the prime ministers and presidents and CEOs of countries and companies meet. And sustainability this year, it happened in January or February, was the number one topic, right? About how do we protect the environment, global warming, all of those types of things. So I think that this is a great question, and it's an area that I think a lot about. And this is definitely one of the things that if you're ever interested in this space, spending that time to understand carbon emissions and what the core sources are, and then thinking about ideas of what you could do with data science, I think is a great place to spend time. So I think we're at the hour. Unfortunately, I do have to head someplace, but it's
Yeah.
been really fun talking to all of you.
Yes, sir.
So, so thanks so much for your time. I know it's 9:30 p.m., so maybe you can go back, have dinner, meet up with friends, all of the things that I'm holding you back from. So
No,
again,
sir, it
thanks so
was
much.
actually a very much learning session for all of us, and actually got to learn so many things. I myself am not from a technical background, but I feel that I have learned a lot through this session. So, Pragati,
Thanks so much.
would you please continue?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, of course. So on behalf of Adore India, we'd like to thank you so much for this wonderful session. And I'm sure I speak for everybody who's present here that it has been such a good learning experience for us. And we've had so many new ideas on which we can think about, and especially in terms of our future career and our goals. That has been such a valuable experience. We are so grateful for you to, sharing your experiences and expertise. Also, thank you to all the participants who joined in. Your interesting questions made this discussion so much more valuable and more beneficial to all of us. Uh, we hope that you'll join in for our next Global Indian session. And Mr. Goel, again, thank you so much. We look forward to having more such discussions with you again in the future.
Thanks so much. Thanks.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Despite
Bye-bye,
of
sir.
these
Good night.
odd hours, you are still here and
Thank you so much.
connecting with us. It's actually a big honor for us. Thank you so much for
No,
giving us
it's
this
early my
opportunity.
time. It's more for you guys because it's a Saturday evening, but I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you so much, sir.